You know all those goals you wrote down? I mean, come on, you know all those goals you wrote down over the years. In the beginning of January, probably you wrote your resolutions and your dreams and your visions. And let me ask you a question. What would it be like if all of them could come true? What would it be like if you tapped into an invisible reserve system of energy whereby you were able to create a goal and accomplish a goal? Modern goal setting is exactly that, goal setting. The process that we're learning together right now is called goal accomplishing. In today's show, we're going to talk about some mental hacks that you can use to accomplish nearly anything. EdTalks Live is next. Hey, what's up, party people? My name's Ed Rush, 5-time #1 best-selling author, your host for the most positive place on the planet for insanely implementable ideas. We are here every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Pacific, 1 o'clock Eastern. And today, we're going to talk about how you can use your mind to accomplish great things. And we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. While I'm mentioning the fun, do me a favor, jump in on the right-hand side if you're on YouTube, or below if you're on Facebook or Twitter. Say hello to the community here in EdTalks. I will tell you that every once in a while I'll get an email from somebody that says, Ed, I watch every single one of your episodes and I haven't seen you in chat. So make sure that you jump in and join the community. You know what? There have been business deals that happen right over here in this chat stream, okay, on my shows or my Zoom. So jump in, say hello. I'd love to have you connect with the community. But before I do that, I have to show you something extraordinarily important. I don't know why I thought that video. I have no purpose for telling you this video, showing you that video. As a teacher, I have to. I have to make a teaching point out of it. You know, you can accomplish anything if you want to. You can even become the self-contained version of NASA. Did you see? Dude's got a cigarette and a handful of rockets. And he just, oh man. So, you know, this is an important time for me to tell you kids that you shouldn't smoke. But if you do smoke, use it to light 17 rockets all at one time. I was telling a friend of mine, I actually have heard this from someone else, that I said, telling a friend of mine, if I had a club, the rules would be like this in our club. Don't drink. But if you do drink, don't get drunk. But if you do get drunk, don't pass out. But if you do pass out, make sure you pass out face down so that your name tag doesn't show, okay? So here we go. I think that is absolutely the best thing that I've seen in a really long time. And by the way, you and I both know, especially if you watch the news, you need to smile every once in a while, laugh at some dude lighting fireworks off in the middle of a celebration in India or something like that. Welcome everybody to the show. Today's show is Breathe, Smile, and Crush It. This is your Goal Fuel series. Before I do that, let me jump in and say, oh, that's my chat. What's up, Wendell Bugs? Good to see you, Sally. Welcome to the show. Hello, Daisy. What a blessing, she says, to be here this morning. Everyone from Northern California. What's going on? NorCal. Depends on how far you go. There's by the way, on I think it's not 99. There's a palm tree planted right next to evergreen, I think it's a redwood. So that shows where the difference between Southern California and Northern California. What's up, Robert? Welcome to the show. Good to see you here as well. All right, for those of you who just joined us, my name is Ed Rush. We're in the middle of our Goal Fuel series. Today is Breathe, Smile, and Crush It. We're going to talk today about how to achieve total mind control. But before I do that, I'm going to take you back all the way back to 2003. So I was flying F-18s back in 2003, and if you're familiar with an F-18, you know that it can fly far and fast, but it eventually will run out of gas. So for example, there are airliners who will take off out of San Diego and fly all the way to Hawaii. Well, if you took an airplane, an F-18, out of San Diego and flew to Hawaii, you'd get about a third of the way there before your engines flamed out and you would glide into the water, okay? It just doesn't have the gas to be able to go all the way. But every 2 years, my squadron would take 12 airplanes from San Diego all the way to Japan. You're like, wait a second, Ed, you just told me that a third of the way to Hawaii, the airplane would run out of gas. How do you get all the way to Japan? Well, we do it behind tankers. In fact, we do it behind big Air Force tankers. These are KC-10 tankers. And we flew our airplanes all the way from San Diego to Hawaii. It took a couple days in Hawaii because, why not? And on the way, we would just rotate through and just continue to top off our tanks and continue to top off our tanks and continue to top off our tanks. Took 2 days in Hawaii, took back off out of Hawaii. We were going to fly all the way to Guam, which is a similar trip. It's about a 5-hour flight. And on the way, I heard a noise. That noise went like this, doo-doo, doo-doo. Now, if you're a pilot in an F-18, that's not a good noise. That noise is typically followed by a woman's voice. There are actually 3 different recorded women's voices and 1 male voice inside of the F-18. And that woman's voice said, caution, caution. So I heard the noise, doo-doo, doo-doo. I heard the voice, caution, caution. That person is now directing me to my instrument panel. So the third thing I do is look at my instrument panel and I see that I've got a significant problem in my airplane. In fact, I've got a left engine pressure issue in my airplane. Now, under normal circumstances, if you have an oil pressure problem in one of your 2 engines in an F-18, you simply shut down that one engine and you fly to the closest airfield and you land, and you're pretty typically safe because you don't have far to go. But in this particular case, I was in between the islands of Hawaii and the place called Wake Island where I was headed to that particular day. Even though I was supposed to go to Guam, that's the next closest landing field. I was 1,000 miles away from Hawaii and 1,000 miles away from Wake Island when I heard a noise, heard a voice, and saw that engine indication. What do you do when your engine, which in this case was about to catch on fire, and you're 1,000 miles away, 2.5 hours away from any landing field? Well, the first thing they teach you to do in an F-18 when there is an emergency is to push the clock. Now, inside of our airplane, we have this little 8-day clock. You literally wind the clock, and it's like a regular clock. It's nothing digital. It's just the clock, just the dial of the clock goes around and around and around. And they tell you in training, whenever you get yourself into an emergency situation, the first thing that you should do is push the clock. Now, why in the world, in the middle of an emergency where your engine is catching on fire, would you push a clock? Why would instructors tell a student the first thing you should do is to push a clock? Well, the reason for that is they discovered that in extremist situations, the first reaction a pilot makes is almost always the wrong reaction. It's typically done without thinking. And many times in the past, a pilot has gotten an indication like a left engine pressure, oil pressure indication, and taken the right engine accidentally and shut it down. Now you have an engine that's off and another engine that's not working, and you are going to be ejecting soon. And so the first thing that they tell you to do is to push the clock. Because what that gives you the opportunity to do for just a moment is to breathe. As you take that breath, your thoughts begin to come back to you. And the second thing I did in the airplane that day was to smile. We're like, wait a second, Ed, you got an engine that's about to catch on fire. The first thing you do is push a clock, then you breathe and you smile? Like, when are you going to get to this emergency thing? Remember, this is happening near simultaneously, but that smile does some pretty amazing things. That smile sends a signal to the rest of your body and to your mind that says, hey, everything's going to be A-OK. The next thing I did is the procedure that was written in my emergency procedures book. I pulled the throttles back to idle, and then the engine pressure stayed there, and then I pulled the throttle completely off after confirming that it was the correct engine with the person sitting in the back seat of my airplane. I then flew a single-engine airplane over 1,000 miles to the island of Wake Island, where I set the single F-18 record for the distance of miles flown in a single-seat airplane, and was able to save the airplane because of a simple 3-step process that I'm going to be walking through today when we talk about total mind control. That process goes like this: breathe, smile, and then take the next most logical step to get you to your destination. Today we're going to cover a range of topics, but they're all underneath the topic of controlling your mind, because if you want to accomplish your goals, you're going to have to control the way that you think. Today we're going to talk about breathing, we're going to talk about meditation, and we're going to talk about one of the biggest myths in the marketplace today, which is the idea of mindfulness. And we're going to get to all that in just a second. But before I do that, let me say hello to some of our friends. What's up, Bob? Welcome to the show. There's Bob sitting in his car, man. I love that picture. Hi, Diana. Good to see you as well. Hello, Martha. Gracias por acordarse de mí. Martha, yo debiera hablar español como si yo fuera extranjero, pero se me olvidó todo. But I'm glad to have you on the show, and I'm glad that you're here listening to my English, which is probably, your English is probably better than my Spanish. Okay, so thank you for joining us here at the show. We're in the middle of a series called Goal Fuel. We're talking about how you can accomplish almost anything by using a completely refocused way of setting goals. Now, for a little bit of a review, so I'm going to go back just a little bit. This series is on Goal Fuel, and you're like, wait a second, Ed, I'm joining you in the middle of the series. Sometimes people are like, nope, I don't want to join in the middle. I'm just going to give you a little overview. That way you can just start right where we're at right now. So the first thing that I said, is, you know what? If you're going to write on a whiteboard, let's make that look a little bit nicer. Let's do this. All right, there we go. A little bit better. That's Goal Fuel, okay? So when we're talking about Goal Fuel, the first principle that I've taught is to focus on what you have. Now, most people who are creating goals start out with the right idea. They start out with the idea that says, I'm going to write a list of goals that I want to accomplish. And there's really nothing wrong with that, except for the fact that if you write a list of things you don't have, you typically start to spend your time focusing on the things that you don't have. And what ends up happening, the roots of the tree begin to grow in the wrong direction. So, for example, some of you read the email that I sent out this morning, the weekly flight brief email. And in that email, what I said was, when you find yourself in a place where you're in a scarcity place. So let's say you wake up in the morning and you write down your goal and you go, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm making $100,000 a year right now. I'm going to write down a goal that I can make $500,000 a year. So my goal is $500,000 a year. And what you just did with your goal is a very noble exercise. You did the right thing. You wrote it down. You're like, hey, man, I want to accomplish more. And I love it. I love it if that's you. My entrepreneurs that I work with all want to accomplish more. And you write it down. You're like, I want to make $500,000, $500,000, $500,000. But what ends up happening is that the distance between you and that $500,000 is there. And if you're focusing all of your time and attention on the things that you don't have, what you start to do is train yourself to not have things. Literally, the very opposite of what you're trying to accomplish is the thing that you're delivering. You are training yourself to not have things. And if this continues out, the roots start to dig themselves into the ground and you start to live in a perpetual state of not having things. That leads inevitably to discouragement, which eventually leads to apathy and also some worse things after that. So today's email, you might have seen me write, talk about how the eventual fruit of discouragement and apathy can actually turn into jealousy and discontentment. And so I made a comment, which was like last week, Tom Brady, right, on last Sunday, won his 7th Super Bowl. That's amazing, dude. 7 Super Bowls. Dude won 5 MVPs, okay? And the next day on Twitter, half the people on Twitter were like, Tom Brady wasn't wearing a mask. I hate that guy, okay? And I was like, look, dude won his 7th Super Bowl. Let the guy who's like one of the healthiest people in the world, next to some of the healthiest people in the world, let him just enjoy his Super Bowl for like a day. And then I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? I'm just going to admit something publicly, okay? I remember at one point, I was looking at Tom Brady, I'm like, man, dang, that guy's got a lot of money. He's a great football player. He's not even that much younger than me. I'm like, he looks great. He's in great shape. I remember for like 5 seconds feeling like a little jealous, like, oh man, Tom Brady. And I realized that's not healthy. It's not healthy to look at somebody else and be like, man, because what happens is jealousy turns into anger. And I thought, you know what, maybe, just maybe, some of those people on Twitter who were like, Tom Brady is not wearing a mask, maybe underneath the surface is a little bit of jealousy that Tom Brady was eating more than his fair share of success pie. Just think about that for a moment. You see, I realized this once about 5 years ago. This was like amazing, amazing lesson that I learned. I was working with an entrepreneur who wasn't a client. It was a peer of mine who was younger than me, and he was so successful, and he became so successful so fast. And I remember I was sitting there with him, and I was like, man, this guy didn't deserve that success that fast. He was making millions of dollars. And I'm like, how did it happen so fast? I mean, I've been doing this for a while, but like, I felt jealous actually. And then about a year later, I looked back at that conversation. You know what I realized? God was putting that individual in my life so that I could see what was possible. But instead of using that as fuel, instead of using that as motivation, I used it and turned it into jealousy. I missed the lesson. And so sometimes God puts people in front of you. God puts people into your life like Tom Brady to show you, you know what? You can do better and you can do more. And America turned and went, dude's not wearing a mask. How messed up is that? But it's messed up because people have been focusing on the thing that they don't have. So you start with what you do. The second thing, I talked about this in the last show, is to focus on abundance. You have to start with an abundance mindset. The world's an abundant place. Most people think there's one pie. The truth is entrepreneurs make more pies. And so if you have an abundance mindset, you can realize, hey, guess what? I can make $500,000 and I can actually probably help somebody else make $500,000. And the world could actually be a better place for all of us. And then the third step is to train your brain. This is getting yourself into a place where you're thinking well so that you can fuel your goals. And we've got a few more days left in our series. Actually, on Tuesday, I'm going to show you the slide for this a little bit later on. But on Tuesday, I'm going to talk actually about the importance of prayer, the powerful, powerful importance of prayer, and even how prayer itself can completely change your mental physiology. I'm talking about the electrical waves going through your brain, how prayer can significantly change that. But right now, we're talking about, that's, by the way, on Tuesday, I'm going to talk to you about connect to purpose, okay? But today, we're talking in the series on how to train your brain. You'll remember just a few weeks ago, I talked about one of the most important things you can do to train your brain are the people who are around you, okay? And that was the first one. Now, we're going to get into the second, third, and fourth parts of training your brain today. But before I do that, I'm going to jump in the chat and then I'm going to come back and we're going to get cranking. So get ready to take some notes because I'm going to move pretty fast through these things, okay? So, yes, thank you, Bob. What a great quote. It takes a big person to celebrate the success of others. That's great. I was very envious of Tampa's parade, yeah. Oh, man, it's great. Miracle of seeds. Plant the seed, grow the tomato, save the seeds in the tomato abundance. Isn't that amazing? Oh my gosh, Diana, thank you for saying that. My wife, as you know, because we've talked about this, Diana, my wife has this beautiful organic garden. And I remember just looking at this planter box and I was like, this is amazing. This thing literally takes out of the ground all of these raw materials and turns it into a tomato. That is unbelievable. If you just spend time just looking at something growing, it'll blow your mind. It turns ground and water into a tomato, and then like Diana said, it gives you the seeds back. That is beyond amazing. It's just absolutely beautiful, this amazing creation that God's given us. I love it. I love it. I see everything that happens to the lesson God wants me to learn. Oh man, I love it. I love it. Thank you, Paul. By the way, Paul, you come on Tuesday, man, because we're going to dial it in. You'll hear a perspective on prayer that you don't hear, okay? And by the way, it doesn't matter what your coming to the show on Tuesday. It doesn't matter what your belief system is in terms of your spiritual beliefs or anything like that. we're going to do it all from a place of love and acceptance and kindness. Okay, so I know some people who come to these little sessions. The show's called The Amazing, Unbelievable Power of Prayer in Business. And some people are like, Ed, I don't really do this religious thing. And some people have told me that, have come to my events before where we do a little session about this and their mind gets blown. Okay, so let's get cranking into today's topic. Thank you for your amazing comments. By the way, if you haven't already done so, click the subscribe button down here on YouTube or the like button if you wouldn't mind doing that. There's also a share button. I should ask this every show and I don't. I've done 124 shows, I think now, and I probably asked 7 times, okay? So just double up every time I ask because I keep forgetting to ask. There is a share button. If you wouldn't mind sharing today's show or a future show on the social media, that would be a real honor to me. Okay, so let's get into talking about your mind. So this is my favorite mind control strategy. Today we're going to talk about how you can dominate your mind so that you can create any kind of goal and accomplish any kind of goal. Now, there is a verse in Proverbs, I think it's Proverbs 23, that says, as a person thinks in their heart, so they are. The actual verse says, as a man thinks in his heart, so he is. Have you ever met somebody who had all kinds of gifting, physical, mental gifting, but they're a perpetual Eeyore? Remember Eeyore from the Winnie the Pooh series? Eeyore was like, everything's bad. Everything's going to turn out bad. Have you ever met one of those people who constantly tells themselves how bad things are going to be? And then when that thing happens, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or have you ever met someone who had no earthly right to success? I mean, have you ever met someone like that before that you look at and you're like, how is it possible that that guy is so successful? Have you ever wondered why that happens? Well, it starts right here. There is a myth in today's marketplace about something called mindfulness. You've probably heard people talk about mindfulness. It's a very popular thing for people to talk about right now. And I call the current teaching on mindfulness a myth. That's because the approach towards mindfulness is to be mindful. But the question I always ask is, mindful of what? Because if you're going to be mindful, if your mind is going to be full, what do you want it to be full of? Okay, and this is the most important part of this because a lot of the mindfulness folks, by the way, mean really well. There's nothing, I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but a lot of mindfulness folks talk about the idea of emptying your mind. Okay, look, I'm all for emptying your mind if there's baloney trash up there, all right? But look, part of the idea is to fill your mind with the things that you want to fill your mind with, which is why step number 1 in creating and dominating your thoughts is 100% ownership. That's the reason why, some of you heard me say this on a show just a few weeks ago, that's the reason why even down to my very dreams, I've decided to take complete and 100% responsibility for it. Now you're like, wait a second, Ed. My dreams are like all over the place. Yeah, mine are too. Like, you know, if I read a Tom Clancy book that night, I'm going to be like fighting the Russians, okay? I mean, like for real, like the last few weeks, my family and I, we've been watching Downton Abbey. You ever watch that series? So I didn't watch it when it originally came out. My wife and my daughter did. And then I just decided, hey, let's watch this series, Downton Abbey. So we're now in the third series of, the third season of Downton Abbey. You know, they're having trouble in the estate because they always have trouble in the estate. Like financial problems are now hitting Downton Abbey, right? But like in my dreams that night, I'm like running a manor in England, and we're having financial problems. Why do you think in my dreams I'm having financial problems in my manor? Well, that's because for 2 hours before I went to bed, I was watching a story about. Okay, so look, even down to your dreams. Even down to those stray thoughts that you have when you wake up in the morning, right? Even down to those things that you're saying when you're sitting there, like Ed told me to meditate. I'm going to start to meditate. Even down to those stray thoughts you have even when you're meditating. Now, is it possible to control every single thought, every single dream, everything that goes through your mind? No, you're not going to get to 100%. Not much like you're not going to get to your exact perfect body fat and stay there forever and ever and ever. But you know what? That doesn't mean you ought to eat potato chips and sit on the couch all day. So step number one is to take ownership for the way that you think. I'm going to get into step number two, but before I do that, let me jump into chat real quick and just say, hey, what's up, Robert? Thank you for that. Good comment. By the way, you're welcome to jump in as we're going today. You're welcome to just jump in on chat as well. Okay, the second, so we're in the middle of, by the way, for those of you just joined us, my name's Ed Rush. This is our Breathe, Smile, and Crush It. This is the middle of our Goal Fuel series. I am in the middle of my favorite mind control strategy. Okay, the second part is the way that you breathe. Now, in the intro, I said, is that breathe or breath? Breathe. Okay. Which one is that? You tell me in chat. By the way, I think that's breathe. I don't know why I'm actually halfway decent at the English language. I don't know why I get those words messed up. All right, so it's the way that you breathe. Now, there's a crazy thing about breathing. It's this amazing God-given regulatory system. Let me explain. Your heartbeat is fairly autonomous. There is a part of your brain that controls your heart rate, and you really don't have control over that. Now, you know that there are things you can do to elevate your heart rate. You could do some sort of exercise, you could do some sort of movement, or you could terrify yourself, okay? You also know that there's some things that you can do to calm your heart rate down, but for the most part, your heart rate sort of just happens on its own. Like, for example, unlike breathing, if you wanted to just completely stop your heart for who knows what reason, you can't do that. You don't have the faculties to be able to do that, and thank God that He created us that way. But on another sense, there are some things that you have near complete control over. For example, if you take your hand and just begin to move your hand, that's because you decided to move your hand. And if your hand goes down and doesn't move, that's because you decided to do that as well. And with very few exceptions, that's under near 100% control. I mean, the few exceptions are, like when your arm falls asleep in the middle of the night or something like that, but it comes back quickly. Breathing, however, is one of those exercises that crosses between the void, between autonomous and control. So, for example, if you wanted to take a big, deep breath, do that with me, and then let that breath out, you could do that in a perfectly controlled fashion. If you wanted to hold your breath, you could do that actually up until a point in a perfectly controlled fashion. But for the most part, maybe 98, maybe 99% of the time, your breathing ebbs and flows on its own without your coercing it, without your even thinking about it. Because breathing is one of those things that crosses across the void. Now, the reason that breath is so important is because it mimics or models the same thing that we're trying to do with your brain. So I want you to think about this for a moment. Most people, their thoughts are happening much like they're breathing, right? Like until I mentioned breathing, you were watching this particular show either on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you watch the show, but as you're watching this, you weren't thinking about your breathing until I mentioned it and I said breathe in, breathe out. You controlled your breath for a second, and then you probably went back to watching me, hopefully not with another 10 screens open or something like that, but you went back to watching me and your breath kind of took over naturally. Well, that's the way your brain works. That's the way your thinking works. For the most part, your thinking is happening in a fairly autonomous action, while at certain times you can focus and control that thinking. Well, the idea is you want to have domination, or you want to have mastery over all of your thoughts. And so one of the hacks, one of the backdoor ways to be able to start to do that is to start to be able to control your breathing. And I typically do this probably for about 5, maybe 10 minutes a day. I will do an exercise, some of you have gone through with me, called box breathing. Now, this isn't the only exercise. There are thousands of breathing exercises, but one of the exercises that I love to do, I just pulled this little website up, is called box breathing. If you look over to the right, this is this little website. The way that box breathing works is you would take an inhale for a certain period of time, like maybe 4 or 5 seconds. You'd hold it for a certain period of time. You would exhale then for 4 or 5 seconds, and then you would hold. And you do that for maybe about 5 minutes. Did you catch that? Breathe in, hold, breathe out, 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and then repeat that process. Now, every time I do that, it seems like the most basic and fundamentally stupid exercise. You're just breathing. Every time I do that, after about 5 minutes of doing it, I actually feel really good. That's because you've taken control of a process that typically runs autonomously. And what you're training yourself to do as you're training yourself to breathe is you're training yourself to control some other automatic processes that are happening up here as well. In a moment, we're going to get to the place that brings meditation in. But the first thing I can tell you is that all of those thoughts that you thought were just sort of randomly jumbling about, all of those thoughts can begin to be controlled and shepherded in the right direction when you're able to control them, and you start to learn how to control them by doing your breathing. So one of the things that I just recommend to some of the people that I work with and that I'm training is just start with some basic exercises to begin to train your breath. I like to use a little app called Pranayama. It is literally the most basic app that I don't even think has been updated for like 8 years. It's just called Pranayama. Pranayama. It is fundamentally one of the oldest apps, I think, on the App Store, but it's just an app that through the noise, you can begin to control your breathing. Okay? So first step is understanding mindfulness. The second step is ownership. The third step is breathing. We're going to get into meditating here, and then I'm going to take your questions. Okay? Before I do that, let me jump into chat real quick. Take ownership, Ben says. I love. Breathe definition is to draw air and expel it. Thank you. How to use breathe in a sentence. Bob. I'm going to answer that question, Bob. I'll answer it at the end of the show. 5 minutes and I feel peaceful. Yeah, it's amazing what you can do. I mean, the simple act of controlling that. You may be in a day where you feel super busy. You may be in a day where you're feeling like everything's sort of out of control. And what you soon realize is you have a lot more control than you think you do. It's that sense of being out of control that you've created this idea that you can't control things, but you can. Okay, so let's move into our the next step. So let's talk a little bit about meditation and why meditation is so important in the life of an entrepreneur. Now, I will just tell you that in full transparency, I was never really big into meditation. Okay, so I grew up in a fairly traditional Christian home, and even though the term meditate shows up quite a bit in the Bible, I grew up being taught that meditation was part of an Eastern set of religious views that we as Christians didn't espouse. Now, it's too bad because meditation happens to be fundamentally one of the most powerful tools that God himself, the creator, the one that they talk about in the belief system that I grew up in, has given us as this incredible, awesome tool. But in many ways, the community that I grew up in had really thrown the baby out with the bathwater when it came to meditation. So what happened was I was taking a course. I haven't told this story before, by the way. I was taking this course on speed reading from this guy who was this national champion speed reader. I was just trying to learn how to read a little bit faster. And in the course, he said, let's just do a little exercise. And what he had us do was breathe and think of a number. So what you would do, this is so easy, by the way. What he had us do was he said, now I want you to breathe. Close your eyes and breathe. And as you're breathing, picture the number 1. And as you breathe out, picture the number 1 going away. And as you breathe in, picture the number 1 coming closer. And I literally was just picturing this number 1. Breathing out, number 1. Breathing in, number 1. Breathing out. And all he said was, anytime your mind wanders, go to the next number. So I'd be like, 1. I wonder who's going to win the Super Bowl this week. Dang it, 2. Okay. And the idea was to just train yourself to be able to focus on a certain thing while you're breathing. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there like 1. I was actually in a hotel in Yuma, Arizona. I was still in the reserves in the Marine Corps at the time. It was this stinky little hotel. I think it was called Howard Johnson's, actually. And I'm sitting there doing this little breathing exercise. And then all of a sudden, I realized that my hand begins to fall asleep. I was like, what's the deal with that? And then I realized, you know what? You just meditated. All that stuff that you thought was like out of the box, all of a sudden, and I realized, wow, you know what? I just became far more centered. I'm able to be a lot more peaceful in this moment. And so I actually started to bring prayer into meditation. So nowadays, what I'll often do is I'll sit in my chair and I'll do like maybe a little 5-minute meditation. And then all of a sudden, boom, there I am. And I'm just connecting with God in a really true and special way because I've been able to focus my mind. On Tuesday's show, again, some of you know this, next week's show, I'm going to talk about the amazing, unbelievable power of prayer in business. I'm going to talk about how you can transition from meditation into prayer. Now, the reason why, and this is my opinion, that I think meditation works so powerfully is that you're connecting purposely to a computer system inside your brain that people don't typically connect purposely to. Okay, now, when you meditate, there are basically two, this is a very superficial discussion of the brain. Okay, just so you know, when we go into a brain, there's far more detail, obviously, in the way the brain processes. But if you wanted to just simply separate the brain into two processing points, you've got your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. Okay. Now, again, I know a brain surgeon would explain more than this, but from a meditation perspective, it's good to start right here. So, for example, a conscious mind process would be like this. Like right now, my conscious mind is engaged at looking at you and working through this training. I've got my notes. I've got my coffee cup right here that you all know I'm very thankful for. Okay, I've got my whiteboard. I've got these pens that I'm working on over here. Okay, my conscious mind is consciously focused on this process. Now, in the background, you've got my subconscious mind. Now, your conscious mind is really able to do one thing really, really well. Now, I know there are people who say that you're a great multitasker, and there's a reason that you're able to multitask, which we could get to in another training. The reason you can, by the way, is because you've trained certain things into your subconscious, right? So, for example, like driving, you know how you shift into drive? You don't think about that now because you've trained that into your subconscious. Your subconscious can do an infinite number of processing things at any given time simultaneously. I put the number 20 down there just for a reference. Okay, so for example, right now I'm thinking about writing my 6th book. And when I do that, typically my subconscious begins to work to put things together into a process so that it'll actually come out being a really great book. So I've given my subconscious mind the task of collecting and putting together ideas for my next book. Well, while I'm teaching you, my subconscious is like, ooh, I like that thing about the mindfulness thing. We're going to go ahead and put that in chapter 13. So later on, when I go to write some things down about the book, my subconscious is going to put that out because it's working in the background on some things. Okay? This is why what you input into your brain is so important, right? And so you'll have, like, for example, in the Christian world, you'll have these like accountability groups where these guys get together to make sure, like, did you look at something that you weren't supposed to look at online? And they make it like that is like the thing, like the not doing the thing is the thing. Well, the problem with doing the thing, and I'm using this as an example, it could be anything. It could be online poker. You know, it could be like a trip to Tahiti that you've been dreaming about forever that you can't stop thinking about. Whatever it is that you put inside your brain will begin to expand so that it can create the possibility. Okay, so in the example that I just used, which is a nefarious example, but like a guy looking at something that he shouldn't be looking at online. The problem with that is your mind doesn't know the difference between online and reality, and it begins to create possibilities for you into the future. And some of the biggest mistakes that people make have to do with the fact that they were thinking about it beforehand. So the other day I was driving by I live in this little town here in south of San Diego, and I was driving through a little valley, okay, and I looked over and there was this liquor store that was sitting right there. And I thought to myself, you know what? I've never, ever in my life wanted to rob a liquor store. I thought that was kind of a stray thought, but I thought, I never wanted to rob a liquor store. But I thought, you know what, there's people out there who actually really struggle with that. Like, for real. Like, they go by liquor stores and they're like, oh man, I want to rob that so bad, but I'm not going to. And they actually struggle with the idea that they want to rob a store. That's never occurred to me. That's not a particular problem for me, but it is for someone else. And the reason it is for someone else is because they've inculcated those thoughts long enough until they start to become reality. Those thoughts were created by things like the game Grand Theft Auto, right? Those thoughts were inculcated by movies and music, which is why input has to be so important. Now, when you meditate, what you end up doing, and this is again a very simplistic discussion of it, when you meditate, what you end up doing is taking the conscious mind processing out of the way for a little while and kind of shelving it and really interfacing with your subconscious. I think it is the fastest way to hack into your subconscious mind. So I've done meditations before where I literally mentally went into my brain and I was going through the files in my brain, beginning to clean some things out and put some things in place. I think that actually was really happening inside my brain chemically as I was actually imagining it inside of a meditation, okay? So my favorite tools for meditation, I'm gonna show you in just a moment, but I love the idea of just spending a little bit of time every single day in some sort of meditative position or posture because it begins to expand into the rest of your day. Now, if you're new to meditation, my favorite tool to give you is a tool, you can look at the screen, it's a tool called Headspace. I love Headspace because it is very, very simple and it's very, very easy to try, okay? So if you go over here and you click on your free trial, what Headspace, at least the last time I checked, gives you is a 10-day free trial of their software where you can do 10-minute meditations per day. And I will typically start with somebody who's never meditated before and I say, look, go to Headspace, do 10 days, just challenge yourself to do 10 minutes a day because anyone can do 10 minutes a day of anything, right? So I did my first trial on Headspace. I thought that was really good. And they have a pretty good explanation of an understanding of meditation, and it's a great place to start. Now, my advanced tool for you is a website called Insight Timer. And by the way, I think I have affiliate links to both of those. I think it's actually just edrush.com/headspace and edrush.com/insight timer, but you can go directly to those if you want to. Now, the thing about Insight Timer I love is that they include teachers and meditation coaches from around the world. There are people, thousands and thousands of instructors who have different meditations that you can just simply try and download. And literally, you will never get to the end of trying different ones. In fact, I liked Insight Timer's platform so much that I actually liked the idea of creating my own guided meditation. So I wanted to put my own meditations on Insight Timer's platform. The little backstory is I didn't want to put Ed Rush as a meditation coach because it's not really like my brand, you know. So I created this pseudonym and I bought a royalty-free picture. And so if you want to know, I am that's me. I came up with the name. I thought this was like the best meditation name in the history of meditation names, which is Brock Divine. But that's I don't know why I think that's so funny. Brock Divine is an accomplished speaker, author, and thought leader. So the meditation that I put on there is actually, this is me. This is meditating to see, hear that? Some of you have heard me tell that story before. I don't know why that is so funny, but I wanted my stuff on there. I didn't want my face or my name on there. But I've said it enough publicly now. Everybody knows who it is. Anyway, I should probably just put my own name. But I like the idea of meditating to the Psalms. The Psalms are very powerful, very, very powerful prayers. And when you meditate to those, I think sometimes some really amazing things happen. All right, so I've got one more thing we're going to teach. But by the way, I just want to say thank you. I'm going to jump into chat real quick and just say what's up. So the app is called, that I use is called, I'll type it in the chat, or maybe Delisa if you're here, it's Pranayama, P-R-A-N-A, Yama, Y-A-M-A. Maybe I can find that in the, there it is. Thank you, Ski. Appreciate it, buddy. What's up, Billy Wilcox? Good to see you, pal. Very good. What's up, Bob? I got to tell you my call sign, Bob. I promise that I will do that. Okay, so for those of you who just joined us, we started today by a little review. Today, by the way, is Breathe, Smile, and Crush It. We talked about starting on focusing what you have, focusing on abundance, which is number 2, then training your brain, And then I went into my favorite mind control strategy, which is breathing and meditation. I said, all right, so let's talk about meditation. Okay, the third thing and the last thing we're going to cover today is this. It's just some simple meditation exercises and how you can really kind of dial this in if you really want to dial it in, okay? I said start with Headspace. If you've never really done any meditation before, start there. If you're intermediate, advanced, you could still go there and get some great tools. They really do have some incredible meditation exercises, and I like taking different tools from different people. Insight Timer, I thought, is the best current app on meditation right now, just because of the wealth of apps that they have. And by the way, there is a course on Insight Timer called Pranayama, which is also a really, really great breathing course. I think it's like a 10-day breathing course. Super, super solid, okay? Now, here's what I just recommend. Give it about 10 hours. Give it about 10 minutes in the morning or 10 minutes at night and just get started. But as you're beginning to learn this, what I recommend is see if you can go long for one day. Like there's always a day in the week where you're like, I can set aside 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the morning to be able to do this. There is something extremely powerful that happens when you go long. Like give yourself an hour, okay? And look, be nice to yourself. There's a chance you might fall asleep, okay? That might happen. There's a chance that it might not work or your mind might be in a place where it's just not working. That's actually part of the exercise, okay? But if you have a chance to do a longer meditation, sometimes you'll find at about the 20 or 30 minute mark, man, you dial in, okay? And I have done for years an exercise, just a really powerful spiritual exercise where I will literally download, I pretend that I'm downloading my instructions for the day from like the main central hub server, which is where God would communicate from. And I would sit there in the morning and be like, and then all of a sudden I realized today's gonna be a very peaceful day where there's gonna be some great things that are accomplished, okay? And so those are just some thoughts on how to meditate and how to get started meditating, all right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to main screen here, and I'm gonna hang out a little bit longer today just to answer any questions you have. That's the core of today's teaching. There goes that pile of notes. Let's see if I can make Jordan. It didn't even make it, by the way. I mean, there's no way for you to know. I could have just lied to you, but actually it jammed in between my in between the trash can and the corner. So, sort of like one of those balls in the NBA that kind of gets stuck there. Ed Devine, boom. All right, so here's the call sign, Bob. So my call sign was head, H-E-A-D. I think I have here it is. Here's one of my old squadron mugs. This is my last squadron. You can see my call sign right on the back here, which is head. See that? That's my call sign. Which people always say the best you can do is break even with a call sign. So if your call sign is just okay, you better be happy about that. So my call sign was head for the term head rush. It was also head, if you've ever seen So I Married an Axe Murderer, it was also head because my actual head looked very similar to Heed from So I Married an Axe Murderer. So get the rebound, thank you. So that was my call sign. And man, half of the call signs people got in the Marine Corps, you couldn't even tell people because they were vulgar. The meaning of it was vulgar. All right, so if you have any questions, I'm going to stick around to answer your questions. If you've got any thoughts that you want to add into chat, please do that. Otherwise, I'm going to begin wrapping up the show. Don't forget this guy. For those of you who just joined us, by the way, you missed the introduction. Don't forget the guy who accomplished big things by simply using his cigarettes. Watch, he's gonna get going fast. He's gonna go fast. I don't know why. I think that's so funny. Oh man. All right, see, you can accomplish anything when you set your mind to it. Oh man. Oh boy. Your nephew flies F-15s, baby. The E's. That's a two-seater. Like I flew most of my flights in the F-18 were two-seaters. All right, so next week we're going to get into prayer. I might do 2 on this. By the way, some of you know I do a session at my events where I teach you how to ask God questions about your business and get answers. We might actually go a little deeper on that next week as well. I haven't done one of those sessions for a while. And if you've done one of those with me before, you know it'll blow your mind. It will blow your mind what happens when you take a notepad and start asking God questions. And something about the guided experience of being able to do that, that'll really help you. I know, Ben, you've been there and seen that. It's incredible. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate that. All right, so that's it for today. Thank you for your time and attention. Don't forget, you have a message, a product, or a service that's going to change the world. So when would now be a really great time to do it? The answer to that is, now. And we're going to do it. I mean, I know the world sometimes feels a little dark and discouraging, but remember that you can see light a lot easier when it's super, super dark. So thanks, Ben, for that awesome comment. I'll see you on Tuesday. In the meantime, go out and change the world. EdTalks Live is out.